All right, let's get started then. All right, so today the topic is the #1 secret to end your year strong and land new business wins. So before we get into that, I'll give you a little bit of introduction into the company and who I am. So I'm Christian Banach, obviously. I'm the Principal and Chief Growth Officer of the company. We are a business development and growth consulting firm that helps agencies and B2B companies land 6- and 7-figure opportunities predictably. A little bit of background on me. I started a business out of high school, which eventually grew into a concert promotions business. We worked with Lady Gaga and Pitbull, some really large artists. Along the way, got involved with experiential marketing, did activations for companies like Allstate and Disney and Toyota. And the company really kind of divided itself into concert promotions for ourselves, as well as experiential events for corporate clients. Things were buzzing along great. Then the 2008 recession hit. And like a lot of the clients that we work with now, we didn't have a sales process and we struggled. And I had gone out then and hired a sales consultant who came in and really analyzed our business. And I learned so much from that experience, so much so that I ended up deciding to close down my business and I went to go work full-time at various advertising and marketing agencies for doing business development for the next 10 years. Worked at experiential agencies, worked at holding company agencies, independent agencies. And during that time working at those agencies, I realized that I have a superpower and something I was really good at and something I really enjoyed, which was really the top of the funnel prospecting and breaking into big, large enterprise companies. And kind of fast forward, it was 2020 and the pandemic was raging. And I felt inspired to start my own company. I saw that agencies were struggling themselves. It felt sort of like deja vu all over again to where I was, 10 years prior. And I felt this time I was like the consultant that helped me. I could go out and I could help others. And fast forward, here we are 3 years into it. And we have a really great team and a really great roster of clients. And we've done some really great work. So in terms of some of the great work we've done, this is some clients that we've worked with. So we work with some of the largest, well-known agencies down to small boutique agencies. But our job really is to help them drive growth and build relationships like those you see there on the bottom. And then a little bit about us and how maybe we're different is, again, we're specialists when it comes to agencies. We really focus in on the enterprise level deals. So we're talking, again, these 6- and 7-figure opportunities. We take a really unique, different approach, I think, than others in the space. We call it next gen lead gen, and we're going to talk about that today here. And then our whole philosophy really is around relationships. I've used the word leads a few times. You probably won't hear me say that again, because we really think about these as relationships. And #1, in the enterprise space, you got to think about it that way. But I think especially when we're talking in the marketing and advertising space, this is not like software, where these are leads and MQLs and SQLs. These are really about relationships that you're forming. So our whole approach is really around that. So as far as today's agenda, what we're going to cover, we've already gone through the introduction. We're going to talk about the state of marketing and what we're seeing and clients are telling us. We're going to talk about then that #1 secret for quick wins. I'm going to share a quick case study about that. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to have some Q&A. Hopefully we're able to figure out how to work that through the chat there, though. All right. So in terms of the state of marketing, what we're seeing and clients are telling us is, a lot of them are still kind of subscribing to this old school way where word of mouth, their work, awards and referrals are really what they're using to drive business. However, the market is more competitive than ever, especially with this year, with this sort of recession that we've been straddling. We're really seeing, fewer opportunities, longer sales cycles, and smaller budgets. And you'll see Dan just popped up a poll. I'd love to see from those that are here today, what are you experiencing? And check all of them that seem to apply. But besides what we're seeing here with these, various things that are happening, the way buyers make purchasing decisions has really fundamentally changed with the, internet really coming into prominence, over the last 10 plus years. And then after COVID, things moving more and more virtual. Most of these buyers are maybe 70–80% along their journey, making their decisions before they even reach out to somebody to talk about, an opportunity. So the market has changed. And we really believe that in order to land these types of 6- and 7-figure opportunities and drive predictable growth, that firms must shift their mindset and approach. And looking at the poll here, the results are 94% so far have said that longer sales cycles are impacting you. Smaller budgets, 72%, and fewer opportunities, 61%. So it sounds like definitely the longer sales cycles are hitting everybody, but it sounds like everything is really being impacted by all of these are being impacted with the participants here today. And we're seeing the same thing, even within our own business. We're seeing much longer sales cycles, even deals that have been verbally agreed to, or in some cases even signed, the work, hasn't even started yet. So with all that said, what are we going to do about it? And we really subscribe to this notion, and our philosophy is really what we call relationship making. And it is the practice of creating, building, and nurturing meaningful connections with prospects that lead to long-term and mutually beneficial business relationships. So what that actually means in practice is, we think about relationship making in kind of 3 different areas. The first is, how are we going to build awareness and demand in the marketplace for us, being that it's so competitive these days, to just kind of reach out cold to somebody. While yes, you can sometimes break through and get some results, you're going to see exponentially better results if you're able to build awareness and demand very targeted though to that audience that you're trying to ultimately do business with. So you really want to try to warm them up first. The second part of relationship making is that you need a way now to capture that awareness and demand. At the end of the day, most large companies aren't going to reach out to you. Yes, you're going to get some inbound leads from this, I hope. But if you are not doing something more proactively, you're leaving a lot of opportunities and thus a lot of money on the table. So, so you really have to have something more proactive. And then beyond that, you also have to have a way to nurture those relationships that you've started. This is still enterprise sales. I wish, I had a way to fast track this, but you're not going to cold call the, CMO of Procter & Gamble and the next day have $1 million deal. I wish it worked that way. It just doesn't. So you not only have to have a way to, first and foremost, get in front of those prospects, but you have to have a plan in place to nurture those relationships, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, maybe even longer down the road. Because if you're only focused on trying to get a quick hit and a quick win, then you're ultimately leaving, opportunities on the table. But that being said, the focus of today, is what if you do need to get some quick wins? While yes, this is the process, what would I do and what do we do for clients when we do need to get something quicker on the table? And there's one particular thing that we want to share with you today that I think would really help. I saw a question go up, Dan. Have we figured out the chat?
No. I have not, because I think once it started, it's set. But I sent a message to everyone to use the submit questions, use the Q&A, which is working.
Okay, fabulous. All right, great. All right, so without further ado, then we'll talk about this #1 secret for quick wins. And I want to take a quick step back here, just because when we think about prospecting, we really look at this in 3 different buckets. We think about it as cold prospects. So these are prospects that are unfamiliar with you and your products or services. This is what most people think about when they think about prospecting. It's, hey, we want to win a client in consumer packaged goods, CPG. Let's build a list of CPG companies and let's write some messaging and let's try to get in front of them and get some meetings. And what is really great about that approach is there's kind of a limitless number of companies that you could reach out to, again, depending on your ICP. You can be very specific and target specific companies or specific people within those companies. The cons for it is, again, if you're going to really see good success with this, you really need to also have that awareness and demand program, again, to kind of warm them up. So this is a little bit of a longer cycle, but definitely, you can see great results with it. The second bucket here is these next two really are ones that are often overlooked, and there's a lot of really ripe opportunities for them. The second is engaged prospects. So these are prospects that are actively interacting with you, but they've not committed to any sort of meeting or RFP or anything at this point in time. So what does that mean, interacted with you? So if you are active on social media, your company or even your founders and leaders, maybe these are folks that are following you, that are viewing your profile, that are liking and commenting on your post. Maybe you have an email newsletter. These are people that are highly engaged in opening that email, clicking on that email. Perhaps your website is another great tool. There are companies visiting your website, and with tools like website visitor ID tracking, we can know, which companies are visiting your website. So the net of this is these are all companies and prospects that to some various degree have been, looking into you, raising their hand, sniffing something out. So the pros to this is that they're much more likely to be in market than the cold prospects. These will also convert faster. The cons to this is it's really limited to your traffic and engagement that you're getting. And especially if you're not doing a whole lot from a demand and marketing standpoint, this will be limited. So it doesn't mean don't review it and look at it on a monthly basis, but it may not be enough to get you where you want to go. And then the third part, which is what we're going to talk about here today, is warm prospects. These are prospects that know, like, and trust you already. So these are people that are in your professional networks. That could be in yours that are on this particular webinar here today. Or these are prospects that are on your team's networks as well. So what the pros here are is that there is a much lower sales and marketing cost, because you don't need to warm these prospects up and do all this other marketing. They already know who you are. And these will also convert the fastest because it's over the barrier of getting to know each other. They already, again, know, like, and trust you. The cons, very similar to the engaged prospect, is that you're really limited to your team's existing networks. And, we work with a lot of clients, and some have very, vast networks, and some are a little bit more limited. But there's always, with anyone we're looking at, there's always some really good prospects in there. And that's really what we're going to focus in and talk about today. Tracy, I saw you had a question about the slides being shared. And yes, these slides will all be shared, as well as the recording for today.
Got it. I didn't want to interrupt your flow, Christian. You were on a roll.
Sounds good. So the warm prospects is what we call the gold mine. This is a gold mine. Now, why is it a gold mine? Because clients that we've worked with have moved on to new companies. Clients that were junior, maybe, that maybe were our day-to-day contacts, have now been promoted into decision-making roles. And then there are colleagues that might have worked at your firm, or maybe colleagues from, college or other social activities and groups that you're involved in. They may have gone and worked client side. So there's all this movement that's happening within our networks. And what we find time and time again is, while most of us have done a decent job, like if we're going to use LinkedIn as an example, connecting with these folks on LinkedIn, most people have not done a really good job of nurturing those relationships, staying on top of who's gone where have they been, what are they doing, and then even if you have a general sense of where they may have gone, have you even stayed in contact with them about this at all? And in most cases, the answer is no. Most clients have not done a really great job at this. However, that's why there's a gold mine. But the question is, how do we systematize and scale the mining of these networks? I think we would all agree that there are some really great prospects and contacts that we have in our networks, but we lack a systemized approach to be able to do this. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So we've developed a 5-step process that we do for our clients every month that we're working with them. And the bottom line, though, is this is a process that you can adopt and take into your own agency. And we're essentially pulling back the curtain and going to share exactly what that process is. So the first step to the process is to export your LinkedIn connections. And there is a feature on LinkedIn, and we'll talk about this in a second, where you're able to actually export those. So you can get your team involved and they could download their LinkedIn contacts. So we're going to go over each one of these in detail here. The next step would be to filter and select the relevant connections. So as we all know, we have big networks probably we've built, but not all of them are going to be prospects. So we're going to filter those down. We're going to enrich those prospects with the data that we're going to need in order to contact them. We're going to then write personalized and value-driven messaging. And then we are going to, activate prospecting. I know Dan just threw up a poll on there, but I'm curious to ask, I'll leave this up here for a little bit, but are you guys doing anything when it comes to your professional networks? Are you doing this at all? Are you doing this frequently? Like, I'd love to see kind of at what level everybody, is participating in something like this for. So let's dive into each one of these steps in detail. So this is going to be very tactical from this point, but you're going to be able to walk away with an exact process that you can bring to your firm. And again, we're going to have the recording, we're going to have the slides. And then at the end, I'm going to, say if anybody wants to talk to me one-to-one about this, we'd be happy to set up some one-to-one calls and help you out as well. So in terms of exporting your LinkedIn contacts, most people don't realize this. However, there is a way that you can go into your settings and go to data privacy and then click on connections here in the middle, and you can request an archive. And what that is going to do is it is going to give you a Excel, or I should say a CSV file of all of your LinkedIn contacts. And it's going to look something like this. So you're going to get items like first name, last name, URL, email address, and I'm going to come back to that, company, position, and then the date that you connected with that individual. So this gives you enough where you can kind of at least get a sense of the companies and the positions, and you could start to look through who's who. You will likely still need to, view the different profiles because some of the companies you're not going to be familiar with. And now in terms of the email itself, the way LinkedIn works this is if people have this chosen to allow their email to be shared. In our experience, most people do not. So one thing I want to clarify then is that we have a whole separate step of this process where we're going to find their email address, because what we're finding is our channel to reach out to these folks, although yes, we're using kind of LinkedIn as a CRM to really understand who is in our networks, we're not going to use LinkedIn as the primary communication channel. So we're going to need to get their email addresses, and we're going to share a little bit later exactly how to do that. So looking at the list here of the poll that we just did, it looks like we have 6% not doing it at all, 22% occasionally, 44 doing okay, but room for improvement. So hopefully, again, this will be good takeaways. Some using it frequently, 22%, and just one person that's utilizing it fully. So it sounds like there's some room for opportunity for growth here, which is great. And I think that's why everybody's here. So to move ahead, you might be asking, well, who should participate in something like this? So obviously, in our opinion, founders, principals, C-suites, senior leadership, business development, anybody with those titles should absolutely be a part of this program. However, I would argue that others should be participating as well. And who are those others? Anybody in account services, creative, media planning, research, production, digital, public relations, finance. Everybody, in my opinion, in our opinion, everybody should participate. Now, while you're more likely to find when you're with your senior leadership team, their networks are probably going to be much deeper, right? They've got, 20 years or whatever years of experience. They might have worked at different firms. They've worked across many different clients. Maybe they're doing speaking engagements, or they've done other things where they've been able to build up their network and their following. So their networks are going to be stronger. Yes. However, even more junior level, team members, you don't know. They may have worked somewhere else. They may have a friend from college. They may have family friends. So we believe that getting everybody to participate is really smart, and it only takes one. When we're chasing these bigger deals, all it takes is one of the right contacts, and that could make your entire year. Again, depending maybe on your agency size, but. So we really encourage everybody to get involved. I think this is also a great way to have everybody feel a part of the growth of the firm. And while at the same time, I know that there are team members that maybe maybe a little adverse to sales or feel apprehensive about reaching out to people. We're going to talk a little bit later about how to overcome that. So getting everybody involved would be key. But now what's going to happen is you're going to need to filter and select the relevant connections, because again, we've had a whole, we've built up these networks. They're a wide range. They're not all prospects. And that's true of me. That's true of just about everybody that we've come across. Now, that said, we really believe in targeting, with this particular type of program, decision makers and influencers. And what I mean by each is a decision maker would be somebody that has the right job title, that has the right title rank, that you believe they have the authority to, push through programs like you offer. Influencers, on the other hand, could be somebody that maybe they're a little more junior, but they're in the, say, the marketing department, but they can definitely bring this to their boss. Or an influencer could be somebody, maybe they don't sit in marketing, but maybe they're the VP of human resources. So they could then bring it over to their colleagues on marketing. So they could influence it. And we generally, when we're prospecting for clients, we're generally only targeting decision makers. But when we're doing this type of program, we do influencers as well. And the primary reason for that is the whole idea of trust. When you're prospecting cold, they don't know you. So the odds of them providing a referral to their boss or to someone in a different department is very slim. But when somebody does know you and they like you and trust you, their likelihood of those referrals is, exponentially larger. And those referrals mean a lot. So we always advise to cast a little bit of a wider net for this type of program than you would, typically. We would argue that if it's somebody in the right type of company, even if they're maybe not the right title, you would want to include them as well. The second reason is to cast this kind of wider net is also you can get insider insights. Perhaps, again, your contact at Amazon may not be the head of marketing, but they might have some information about what Amazon's thinking and what some of their business objectives are and what some of their marketing objectives are. And you can use that information to try to get into Amazon, for example, in maybe some other ways. And you're not going to be going at it so cold because you have this insider information. And then the third reason is to stay top of mind. As we talked about, you really want to be able to nurture those relevant connections in your network. And this is just, again, a good way to stay top of mind because you don't know, a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, they might be moving on, they might be getting promoted. So it's just a good way to kind of check in periodically with those folks that make sense. So next, once you've kind of done that, you understand the influencers dynamic as well as the decision makers. You really need to have an ideal company profile as well as a buyer persona for your firm. And it doesn't have to be extensive. You just really need to understand what are the industries, what are maybe the revenue and employee count, what is the geography that we target, and that's where you're going to want to zero in on, because again, you might have a wide network, but if these are companies that are in oil and gas, and your agency doesn't want to work with anybody in oil and gas, it doesn't make sense to reach out to them. So again, but similar to what I just said with the influencer and decision makers, I would cast a little bit of a wider net, push into maybe some categories that are a little bit more of a stretch, because if you know somebody and they're a personal connection, you may not maybe have that category experience, but because you have that relationship with somebody, they may pull you into something and they might look beyond, what the industries are. Same thing from an employee count and revenue standpoint. There might be some firms that might be typically thought of might be too big for you, but if you know somebody there, they might be able to get you in. And then from a buyer persona standpoint, you're going to want to know what are the right job titles, what is the right title rank, how many years of experience do these folks mean? And this is more so probably for the decision makers. So this is how you would classify them. And then you might look at the influencers through a slightly different lens. So now we've kind of filtered these lists down. We have that long laundry list of companies, and we've started to select, who are the right people. Now we have to get into the whole idea of enriching our data. And what we mean by that is it's using sales tech tools to add more detailed information to the basic contact profiles to enhance sales outreach and personalization. And here are 3 tools that we either use directly or we recommend to clients on various budgets. Hunter.io is one that you can download for free right now, and it gives you, I want to say, 50 free credits where you could look somebody up on LinkedIn and find their email address, phone number. Seamless AI is a little more expensive. It's about $100 a month. While Hunter might cap you at 50, Seamless is unlimited, but again, it comes with a little bit of a cost. And then ZoomInfo is much more expensive, but it also has a lot of other bells and whistles. That's what we use here. So for us, it makes sense because we use all those other features. But for this program that we're talking about here today, you can really sign up to Hunter and you can find all your email addresses that you would need, and you could sign up for multiple accounts for different people, and so there's definitely ways around it. So the hurdle here should not be, well, we can't find the email addresses of anybody. You can always use tools like this, and data is really easy to come by nowadays.
Oh, and Christian, ZoomInfo also has a community edition, so you can get like 25 or 50 free contacts a month as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't even familiar with that. And I know Tracy had put in the chat about Wiza. I'm not familiar with Wiza. Apollo, yep, definitely Apollo is another one. I'll actually get a message them a little bit later for more on the sales engagement side. But yeah, there's a lot of tools out there. You can just Google it, and there's an endless supply of them out there. So if you're not familiar with how these tools work, this is an example of how ZoomInfo works, at least. So you would visit the profile of the individual that you want to get the contact information from. They're usually like Chrome extensions, and then you could just click one button on the Chrome extension and it'll pop up with the individual's name, their email, phone number, anything that they have in the various databases that they're involved with. And then you can export these, or you can add them to a list. And then essentially you're going to have something kicked back that looks like this once you've done all your research. So very similar to what you saw previously on the LinkedIn list, but here now it's been enriched. So I've got it blurred out, but you have email addresses and phone numbers in the city and the state, a lot more other information. And then what we do as well is then we start adding our own columns. So we can start putting, things like, well, whose contact is it? Are we in fact going to move forward with this? Who's going to handle it? So there's a lot of other things then that we'll put into these spreadsheets as kind of our last, step in the process when it comes to building out this list. So now we have our list of contacts. We need to write our emails, personalized and value-driven messaging, and we're going to talk about that here. But that said, a couple things that I want to kind of set the table with here is that sales and marketing automation tools have really started to flood the market. When I first really started doing this a lot, 10 plus years ago, these tools that we use, and I'm going to show you on a next slide or so here, they didn't even exist. Now some of them are, unicorn billion-dollar companies that have come up. So in the price point, maybe 5 years ago was quite expensive. Now they've really gone down in price. So in one end, that's great. It makes it more accessible to all of us. But on the other end, it's also mean that there's many, many more cold emails that are flowing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad cold emails that are flooding the market. So it's made it more challenging to cut through. When we think about other channels to reach prospects, the phone. Well, obviously, many of us have gone to remote work. Companies are cutting their office desktop phones, cutting out voicemail. So reaching folks on the phone is more challenging than ever. And then LinkedIn is another channel that you could reach out to. And while we're using LinkedIn to build our list, what we find is that LinkedIn is not always the best platform to communicate on. And I know myself, I get a message on there and it gets lost. Just the user experience is not great. And I'm on it all the time and I'm getting them lost. So you can only imagine with these senior executives who maybe aren't on LinkedIn all day, the experience that they're having. So the net of this is that it's harder than ever to connect with prospects. And that just means that our messaging has to change. It's not good enough just to send sort of a generic email out. You really have to be very personalized, as well as you have to offer value. And that's what we'll kind of unpack at a high level here today. So the way to overcome it, again, is that personalization, is that value-driven content. So I want to share a little bit about personalizing a message. So this actually came from SalesLoft, which is a sales automation platform, for lack of a better term, which allows you to send these sort of sales cold emails out. So they've analyzed millions of emails and they looked at the amount of personalization in an email in relation to the email reply rate. So the email reply rate of an email that has no personalization on average is about 3%. When you personalize the message to about 20% of the message being personalized, it actually jumps 112% to almost 7%. Interestingly enough, when you personalize beyond 20%, what their research shows is that there's no additional lift in the response rates. So we've really adopted that for our clients where, yes, we're personalizing, but we're not spending the entire time, personalizing the entire message. We're sort of writing a base template, and then we are personalizing it, about 20% of that along with the subject line for each of them. So the data here shows that personalization will definitely increase your response rates. The other part is providing value-driven content. And you think of cold email, and I'm sure you've received many of these. You've probably received some today that, send an email and they're like, hey, we just like to get 15 minutes in your calendar, tell you all about us, how great we are, how our company culture is amazing, how great our work is, all the awards we've won. Like, the bottom line is prospects ourselves. We don't have time for that. We don't want to be on another one of those kind of boring, generic capabilities types calls. So what we find, especially when you're talking about targeting more large and enterprise companies, is to do something we call a give to get offer. So the idea is you're going to make a deposit. So you're going to give them something before you try to get something back. And that something back we want is their time, right? We want them to take a look. We want to get on their radar. So what we've done and work with our clients, and you should be thinking about, as well, is what do we have that could help these prospects? What are they going to perceive as valuable? So some of the ones that are listed here are things that we work with our clients on. So in some cases, we work with them to develop a free workshop or an inspiration session where we might look at a problem that an industry is experiencing, and our firm or our client has a unique point of view on how to solve it. And we package that up into a 1 hour type of workshop or inspiration session, and we share those insights with them. So now that email, instead of saying, hey, we want 15 minutes, it's instead, hey, we've looked in your industry. We think you might be experiencing this problem. We've got a really interesting perspective on it, and we'd love to share that with you. So that's one area. Another thing that we've been doing quite successfully with clients as well is organizing virtual panels or like a peer networking. So we might get 8, say CMOs or VPs of marketing together. We, as our client, will invite them to talk about some hot topic. And this is really valuable because, again, it's a way now to stand out. You're not asking them to jump on a capabilities call. You're asking them, hey, do you want to participate in a peer networking event? They're interested in it because this is a way for them to network with other people in their field. And they don't normally get the chance to do that, right? Because everybody kind of working in silos. So this is a great chance to meet other people and hear their perspectives on things. And then you as the firm, what benefits for you now, you're seen as an authority because you've organized this and you can hear their pain points and challenges that they talk about on the panel. So I won't go into all these in depth here, but maybe you have a podcast or a popular blog that you can invite them on and interview the prospect. Maybe you can do some sort of free audits. Maybe you've done original research. So the idea here is that you want to be able to come up with something that you can give the prospect, again, to cut through and try to get their attention. And what we find is, the benefits of this is, number one, it cuts through. You don't sound like every other cold email. Number two, you're an authority, right? You are the one organizing this. You have these expert insights. You have a podcast. So you're an authority now. You're not just a salesperson. Number three, it creates a platform to discuss these challenges. These are not sales calls now. These are not one-way dialogues. These are people getting in the room and talking together and discussing things. So the dynamic of these calls is very different. And the last point is it starts the relationship off with reciprocity. You've given them something. So now psychologically, they feel like they need to give something back to you. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you business, although obviously that's what you hope for. But if anything, they are going to be more responsive. They're going to be more apt to give you referrals. They're going to be more open with their situations. So it just really kind of starts things off on the right foot. So with that said, again, back to now creating the messaging. So with all that in mind, we have a cold email framework that we use, and there's really 4 parts to that. The first part is to make a relevant observation. We call it the personalized opener. Then you want to tie that observation to an insight or problem. Then you want to explain what you do to solve that problem. And then the 4th part is you want to have your call to action where you want to open it up for dialogue. So I'm going to give you an example here of what one would look like, and then we'll unpack this as well. So the email might sound something like, afternoon, Bill, your colleague from Harvard, John Smith, and I work together at Sterling Cooper. We recently completed our annual Crafting Magic study. With the challenges facing the tech industry, John, thought you would be interested in the findings as it relates to Microsoft. The study goes into depth into 150 brands, measuring 5 key drivers of creative effectiveness. It's enabled Crocs, Arm & Hammer, and Apple to accelerate growth by balancing reliance on data with unexpected creativity. As John's colleague, we're happy to share the findings with you, worth exploring with us. Let me know. So kind of take a look at this. We talked about the first part is to make a relevant observation, that opener. So this is where we have here, afternoon, Bill, your colleague from Harvard, John Smith, and I work at Sterling Cooper. So it's very, there's your observation, and it's very personalized, right? I mean, this is not something that you would, see in a mass email that goes out. It's unmistakable that this is meant for, in this case, Bill Gates, right? The second part is tying that observation to an insight or problem. So here we talk about, challenges facing the tech industry, and that we have some findings that could help with that. The third part is what you do to solve the problem. So here is where we go into more in depth about that study. So it's not necessarily what you do to solve a problem. It could also be like what you have, this workshop, this inspiration session, whatever it happens to be, in order to help them overcome this problem. And then what we've also done here is we've done some name dropping, right? We throw in Crocs and Arm & Hammer and Apple to add some social proof to this. And then the last part here is the call to action, where we open up for dialogue. So we throw John's name back in there. John is John's colleague. We're happy to share the findings with you. Worth exploring. So, a very different type of cold email than you're probably used to, getting. Where we're here actually trying to do something very personal, and we're, sharing insights with somebody that, if we've done our targeting right, is experiencing this type of an issue. Now, you might be thinking, who is going to be sending these messages that go out there? And there are really two different approaches. There is a more direct approach where anybody in the firm that is participating in the program would send it out directly to their contacts. There's also the other side where you can have somebody send it for them, whether that be your head of business development or your another agency leader. Or in our cases, if we're working with clients, we're most oftentimes sending out the emails on their behalf. So to talk about the pros and cons of each, when you're taking that more direct approach, the pros is that emails originating from the individual who knows them, their own inbox. So right away, they're going to see their name, their colleague's name, and they're going to recognize that. So that could generate some more opens. It also offers the opportunity to hyper-personalize those messages even more. Again, I think if somebody actually sits down and writes something to their individual contacts one by one, it's going to be even more personalized than, just kind of mentioning it. If somebody else is sending them and sort of mentioning, little bits and pieces there. The cons to this, though, and we see this all the time, is that those that are in non-sales roles or maybe not even on the senior leadership team, they might be hesitant to initiate contact. A lot of people are, averse to sales, or they don't want to bother their contacts. So that's a con, and we see that all the time. And then we even see for those that do agree to it, sometimes, they're just busy. They have other things going on and they don't send the messages, or they're not doing enough follow-up with those messages. They might send one email and they don't follow up at all. So there's definitely pros, there's definitely cons. On the other side, the delegated outreach is where, again, you would have someone else that would send it out on their behalf. And the message would sound kind of like the example that I just shared. John asked me to reach out. I work with John. So there is that connection point there where you're mentioning that contact's name. So the pros with this is that, the outreach gets done, right? If you delegate your biz dev person or hire an agency or something to do this for you, it's going to get done. The cons of this is that, again, it may lack a little bit of that personal touch because it's coming from somebody else versus that individual. Now, that said, we do this all the time for clients. And even though we're sending it on behalf of somebody else, we still get meetings all the time with this. So that should not be a roadblock. If people don't want to send it themselves, don't think that it won't work if you send it out on somebody else's behalf. It absolutely can and does. So again, I think this is a way when we're thinking about how do we get more people involved into this program, I think knowing that you give them options. And what we do sometimes as well is, depending on their level of connection to that contact, maybe some people they know really, really well, and they're like, you know what, I'll handle that group. But maybe there's other people that they don't know as well. Maybe they met them at a conference, or they went to college 20 years ago or something like that. The connection's a little bit looser. Maybe those are the ones then that they'll let somebody else, they'll delegate those. So there could be a lot of flexibility. It's not a one size fits all here. So that brings us to the last step here, is how to activate the prospecting. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier about follow-up, but sending one email is not going to be good enough. You really have to do multiple touches. And we recommend for this type of program 3 emails. With our other programs, sometimes we go 4 or 5, but when we're talking about context, we already know 3 seems to be a good number. You want to be persistent, but you don't want to be pushy and come off the wrong way. So 3 emails is really good, and each email will share something a little bit different. What I shared earlier was probably an email number 1. The email number 2, maybe you share a little bit more about that study in that example, or an email 3, you say something else. So the idea is not to just send the same email over and over again, but to try to share maybe a different aspect of it, and maybe one of those 3 will catch their attention. The other thing I want to draw attention to is in the middle column, business days. So the way we would do this is we would typically send the first email on day 1. 2 days later, day 3, we would send email 2, and then 3 business days later, we would send email number 3. That may seem aggressive to you. Sometimes we talk to clients and they're like, well, why are we sending these every week or every other week or once a month? And the reason for that is that if you have too much delay in time, they completely forget about you. Where this becomes effective is that you send an email and then 2 days later you send another one. They see that email and they remember that, oh yeah, I saw that other email as well. Let me see what this is all about, actually. When you leave too much time in between, they don't remember that first email. So everyone seems just like the first cold email that they're receiving, and they're less likely then to open that email up. So we've found this frequency. I mean, I wouldn't advise doing it every day or like 2 emails a day or even, on subsequent days, but by leaving 2 or 3 day gaps, we see very, very little, if any, pushback to some schedule like this. I think where people get upset is when you're starting to send too many emails, and 3 again has been a good number where nobody seems to mind that. But once you get into 5 and 6 and 7, sometimes we do see some pushback if we're going to do sequences that long. So you're going to want to think about your emails 1, 2, and 3, not just the first one. What are you going to say each one? Now, in terms of sending the emails, I know someone had mentioned Apollo earlier, and what these tools here are is like, how are we actually going to send them, right? So I don't want technology to get in the way also of this program here, because again, you don't necessarily need Apollo or Outreach to send out your emails. You can go old school and just send it through Gmail or send it through Microsoft. Granted, yes, you might need a spreadsheet to kind of keep track of, who you sent it to and when you sent it, but it's still a very, viable tool to use. And we're not talking about sending tens of thousands of emails here. You're talking on a much more reasonable volume. So, technology shouldn't be the issue. However, if you're ready to invest into it, a tool like Apollo is, depending on which level you get in, it's maybe $50 to $100 a month. Outreach is what we use here. I think it's built a little bit more for like enterprise level. This is a little bit more expensive, but they all kind of do the same thing now. As I mentioned earlier, these tools were very expensive years ago. They didn't even exist like 10 years ago. And now, they're becoming more and more accessible. So to give you an idea of like, well, what do you even mean by these tools? What an Outreach or Apollo can do is you can actually build those multi-step sequences into the platform itself. So this is an example of one for one of our clients where, you can see manual email day 1, you have the email set up there. Then, 2 days later, you have the next email and you have that plugged in as a template, and then email 3, a couple days after that. And you can put those emails in there and you can have customized fields. So you can do that personalization. So you can set this up to be very manual, where it's just sort of prompting you when to send it. You could set it up to be automated. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can do A/B testing. What's also great about these tools is there's built-in analytics, so you can know who's opening your email, who's clicking your email. You can also look at things like, your reply rates. So you have all the different analytics that you need. So again, I would just get the program going. Don't worry about this right now, and then you could work this in, down the road. So in terms of some metrics I want to share that I think is really relevant here is that, number one, let's just say hypothetically, I've got 2 scenarios here. Scenario number 1 is that you have 10 participants and the average, let's say the average number of connections per participant is 40. And why only 40? I'm talking about 40 influencers or decision makers, right? So it may be much more, but let's just say average of 40. On average, what we see is we convert 2.5% of contacts that we reach out to, we're able to get a meeting for clients. So that would mean if you're reaching out to 10 participants, 40 each, that's 400 connections, 2.5% would mean 10 meetings. And then on average, 1 out of every 10 meetings is turning into a new business win. So just to throw some numbers out there, I mean, if your customer lifetime value is $250,000 and you get 1 business win out of that program, that's $250,000 in revenue with virtually no cost. It's just leveraging and sending out some emails to your team's network. Now, that's a very basic example. Let's talk about scenario number 2, where maybe you're a little bit of a larger firm, or maybe you just get more people to participate. And then maybe you have a little bit, your team has more connections. So you might be talking now, let's say 20 participants, 80 connections, that's 1,600 targets. At that 2.5% conversion rate, you're looking at 40 meetings. If you convert 1 out of 10, like clients typically do, now you're talking about 4 new business wins. And that could be $1 million more in revenue, again, depending on what your average deal size is. So you can just see, I want to share this, that, at a very little cost, something you can do on your own. And again, these deals tend to close much quicker because you don't have to go through the cold courting phase of getting to know each other because they already do know you. So that's that. I want to show a quick case study, and then we'll have some time for questions here. So how we brought this to life for one client is that this one, they actually didn't have a whole lot of participants. They only had 5 senior leaders. One of the leaders in particular was, pretty well known. He had written a couple books and did speaking engagements. So collectively, we had, something over 10,000 contacts between the 5 executives. We went ahead and we filtered those lists, and they really wanted to talk to larger companies that were doing at least $500 million or more in revenue. They had done some original research around ESG. So they were looking for titles or influencers at companies and the individuals in those companies that had maybe something to do or some interest in ESG. So that whittled things down to around 500 contacts that we were left with. So from there, we went ahead and we enriched the data with our technology. We've actually built a proprietary bot that is able to find that contact information. So we can really accelerate we can take tons of lists together and within a day or two be able to come back with the contact data and filter it according to that ICP. So we worked with them on that. And then we went ahead and we started to write that personalized value-driven messaging. So here it was really, since they had done this research on ESG, they had really great insights. They did not share those publicly with anybody, but the offer, if you will, for this email was that, hey, we'll share these insights with you on this call. And the results of that, then we developed a 3 email sequence, and we were able to land 16 meetings for them. And you can see some of the incredible brands that we were able to land meetings with through this program. So Amazon's and Banks America's and Panera. So really, really successful program for them. So to kind of wrap things up, before we get into Q&A, the 3 main takeaways I really want you to walk away from here today is, number 1 is to shift your mindset and approach. If you're not doing things more proactively, whether that be through your networks or just in general, you really need to start thinking about that, because things have gotten way more competitive, and just waiting for the phone to ring is no longer a strategy. Number 2 is to mine the gold in your professional networks. I think you will all be very surprised if you actually sat down and did this exercise, what you actually have. And then the 3rd is to be personalized and value-driven. This is all great, but if you're just going to send out mass blast emails, you're not going to see nearly the results that you would hope for. So if anybody, again, one of the offers that we're going to have here today is if anybody wants to talk about their own strategy, or, how we would maybe approach it for them, we'd be happy to set up, 30-minute strategy session for anybody. There'd be no cost to that. So anybody that registered for this webinar will have that offer. So with that said, want to see if there are any, Q&A questions here in the chat, or I know some people have been sending some in, via email as well.
Actually, Ingrid has a very interesting question. Are you using AI for content creation?
AI for content creation? Yes and no. We are using it in some ways to maybe get like a different perspective on the email. So we might write a cold email and say, ChatGPT, hey, can you, reduce this to 100 words if it was 125 words, or can you rewrite this email? So we might use it to like get some different perspectives and different ideas, but we are not really using it beyond that. We're not using it for personalization. We've tested everything that we can find about the person that does personalization, and we just find it to be very generic. Where it's something like, hey, I saw you went to this college, or, something just really irrelevant. And, when we're doing the personalization, it takes a lot of research. We're spending, a good fair amount of time researching each company, each individual, and trying to find something really relevant to what we offer, and what that give to get might happen to be. And we just has not seen that AI is there yet and can do it. So the answer there is, not really. But I do think, there are some areas that we do explore it, but, I don't think it's there yet for what we've talked about here today.
Got it. And we just had 2 come in. One was that, he wants to watch it again, share it with colleagues. The replay will go out, Christian. When should they anticipate the replay going out?
Probably, I think tomorrow is when we'll have this out.
Got it. Okay. And then Jared, how are you both personalizing the content while using the automated sequence tools?
Great question. So a few different ways to do this. So we will, I think how best to describe it. Every platform calls it a little something different. There could be like called merge tags or dynamic fields or tokens. But essentially what you could do is in that spreadsheet that you have with all the contacts and information, you can write in one of the cells next to that person's name, went to Harvard with him, or however you want to plug that into the email. So you might have like a generic kind of template, if you will, but that one particular kind of snippet will be personalized and pulled from your spreadsheet that you have. So when you use, and this is really when you're using a platform like Outreach or Apollo, you can just upload the spreadsheet. It'll have that custom field. And when you go to send your automated emails, it's going to pull it. I'm sure we've all seen that done with like first names. It's the same concept. However, it's pulling in some additional content that you've written and put into the spreadsheet.
Hey, Christian, could you go back to that slide with the EBD? Because I think that will show the custom. I think it showed the custom field.
Yeah, let's see here. I'm not sure where it went.
Oh, okay. Well, when you get the replay, it was the personal. You'll see it said it had like two squiggly parentheses on both sides. It said custom 21, but that's exactly what he was talking about in Outreach. Okay. Next question, David, how do you approach balancing personalization with volume and scale?
Great question. Yeah, and that's a tough one, because you could sit there and you could research, and spend 3 hours trying to personalize something. And then when you send it out, you're not going to get the volume that you need, because while some people may disagree with what I'm about to say, is you need a high quality. That's like the bar, but you also need to do a certain number of quantity, because it still is a numbers game, but you have to do it at a higher level. So for us, what we do is we have, at least how we operate it, we have a dedicated B2B copywriting team. So they've gotten really good at zeroing in on their only job is to just research these companies and these prospects. They know exactly where to go. I'm going to go to their LinkedIn profile. I'm going to Google them. I'm going to go to the company's website. They have a whole path that they go on to find those insights, and then they take it and then they write it. And they know that on average, at least this is the way we do it. I mean, others I'm sure do different. We try to spend no more than 20 minutes per company researching on average, right? There might be some where you find that nugget, the first, Google search that you do. There might be others where, you find a podcast that the CMO might be speaking on. So you might want to listen to the whole podcast. Now, that said, like where AI comes into this is like there are some tools like AI that you could actually rip the transcript off of the podcast, and you can ask it to, hey, pull out some key insights from this particular podcast. And then the AI might give you those insights, and then you could plug that into an email. So like that's a way to kind of use it. It's not really writing it for you, but it's saving a whole lot of time from sitting and watching a 1 hour, podcast just to try to get a one-off email going. So yes, I do encourage, you to set some limits and find some averages that seem to work out best for you. And just start to know some of the metrics, like again, where you can kind of backdoor this, how many, what is your conversion rate? How many meetings do you set? Of the meetings that you set, how many emails do you have to send to get that? And you could start to figure out what the right mix is for you in terms of volume. And then you can also figure out then how much time you need to be spending at most and at minimum on the personalization.
Awesome. And then Paul, what's the process for the 30-minute strategy consult? Because you offered it, Christian, but you didn't say how to actually.
Yeah, that's a great question. Nothing fancy here. Just send us an email. I'm sure in the Zoom info invite, I think it comes from me. You can reply to that, or Christian at christianbanach.com. Dan, maybe put that in the chat or the thing here, or go to our website. You can go to the contact us form. Nothing totally official, but just mention you are on the website or on the webinar and reference your name, and we'll be happy to get something scheduled with you.
All right. And then Ingrid has an interesting question, which actually, don't get me wrong, they've all been interesting. What favorites free CRM?
Favorite free CRM. So interestingly enough, we don't even use a dedicated CRM here. We don't, HubSpot or Salesforce, we don't use any like third party. Where we use our CRM, because we definitely use one, the way we use it is through outreach, actually. So that's one of the benefits now of these sales engagement platforms, is that they have it's not going to nearly be as robust as what you'll find in a HubSpot or Salesforce, but it does exactly what we need. We don't really need anything more than that. We're not chasing tens of thousands of leads or something like maybe some other types of companies. We're managing a much smaller pipeline. So again, another benefit of maybe investing into Apollo is the same way. They have it built in like that. So so that's what we use. In terms of like clients, I think a lot of them are using HubSpot. That seems to be those that do use a CRM are using HubSpot. I would say most of our clients don't have a CRM, and most of them are not on Salesforce.
Yeah, and one thing to add, the free CRMs, they get you in there free, and a HubSpot's great, but it goes from $50, $25 to $50 a month. You need a little bit more functionality, you're at $1,000 a month. So just be prepared as you grow that the cost profile with those free CRMs skyrocket significantly. All right. And then another follow-up question from Paul. Curious, do you see more traction with influencers or senior director role contacts?
Good question. I don't know if I have exact data to back what I'm about to say, but to me, it seems anecdotally fairly evenly split. We're definitely, again, these are people that know you. So whether they're the CMO of a company or, someone very junior, we're getting similar response rates. It feels like, at least from these different contacts. So yeah, I don't know if we're seeing better traction one way or the other in terms of response rates. In terms of like what happens beyond the response, the influencers are great to get you into the room with the right person and give you maybe some insights. But obviously being able to contact someone directly that that's a decision maker, that just cuts out one step. But I still am a big advocate for going after both.
Awesome. All right. And yeah, we are, I believe we're at the 60-minute mark at this exact moment, Christian.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody who participated here today. I hope you guys got value from it. As we've mentioned, we will be putting together this recording as well as the deck into an email. You're going to be getting that. And then again, if you could easily want to reply to that email and say, hey, we would like to set up that strategy call, that's another way you could reach out to us as well. So we'll try to get that out tomorrow.
Perfect. And awesome. we have a bunch of not questions, but they're chats. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Great session. Thank you. So looks like we have a unanimous almost, Christian, that good value for the time.
Great. Glad to hear that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.